Hello and welcome to Man's Model Moments. You see, I am literally just straight out of the shower. So I was desperately trying to find some cigarettes for my girlfriend, but I couldn't find any. So you'll probably hear her scrambling about in a second. So let me just scroll up, see who we have. David Barber, Go For It Painting, Julian Hall, David Markey, Graham's Modelling, Mayhem, Rich in Leo Model Making. That's a name I don't recognize. May just be me rather than anything. Alex Moore, Graham Coxon, who I expect, like some of you, because I know some of you were there, has just come from the IPMS premiere. John Christmas, Mario, Mark Sixsmith, and I think Gav, Richard Hughes. I think that brings me all up to date. Sorry, just sorting out my dressing gown here. There we go. So very informal. Should have a smoking jacket or something, shouldn't I? So good evening, everybody. Slightly wet in the ears. So the reason I am just coming straight from the shower is I was doing some one-to-one sculpting in the garden. So my lawnmower, this is an aside, by the way, as usual. My lawnmower wasn't working back in October last year. We had a gardener who was supposed to do some other tidying of the garden, and to be honest, he wasn't very good. But we got him to mow the lawn, which he did all apart from one section of it for some reason. I think he thought it was ornamental grass, but it's not. It's just a big tuft of grass, and he left that. Because we had such a mild winter, and it's been quite warm but very wet here over the past couple of months, the grass was like out of control. So I was like, well, I'm going to get a new spark plug. I'm going to get some, check the oil filter, not the oil filter, check the oil, check the fuel filter, get some fuel additive to give it a clean because it hasn't been properly serviced for a while. I got some easy start as well, trying to get it all sorted. And I tried today. It took a while. So replacing the spark plug had no effect at all. The easy start, it was trying. So the combination, had done it. The oil was a little low, so obviously that was topped up. It's only a 2-stroke petrol engine. Then I emptied the fuel out, and there was a fair bit of shit in the fuel. I'd got new fuel, so 99 octane, so get rid of any problems there. And finally, with a few applications of easy start, we had man triumphed over nature, and I managed to mow the back lawn, but it was bloody hard work. It's a self-driving one, and not sit on, just a self-driver. Still, I didn't have the bag on, just had it to mulch, top setting level, and it was still like a chore. So it was sweaty and petrol smelly. Did the premiere, and then I thought I have to have a shower before going live. I can't be here sort of like glistening with sweaty petrol fumes. So anyway, it is now gone through its first pass. Hopefully the weather will be nice over the next couple of days, and at the weekend I can go over it all, collect all those trimmings up and go over it properly and make it actually look nice, because at the moment it just looks like you've just gone to prison and had like a number 3 all over after having a mullet for 20 years or something. So, but anyway, that is why I'm in a dressing gown. Very nice and clean. Yeah, all clean, but there we go. Easy start is like heroin. I guess he's saying 2 engines. He did actually catch fire at one point. It didn't take as a good sign for a petrol engine, but It was just because I'd taken the air filter off and obviously to spray that in. But yeah, it doesn't surprise me. I mean, now is the time. I mean, ideally, a month ago was the time really to get your first cut in, wasn't it? There just hasn't been a dry day. So that's not something you'd want to see, Mario. But trust me. Sharon Stone, yes, especially back in the day. Not myself, no. Julian says, a volunteer with a local museum and attended a committee meeting 11 years ago. I said we needed more volunteers, but was told we don't. 11 years later, apparently, we need more volunteers. Who knew? Yeah. So the reason I made the video was, obviously, we've had this discussion about the IPMS the last couple of airfix and chills. And my problem with the discussion is I had the same discussion at my physical face-to-face model club back in 1999, 2000. No, it was 1998. Actually, it must have been, because it was before I moved down here. So the fact that the society hasn't moved on in at least 25, 26 years is not a good sign, right? The website is still as it was. I tried to find stuff on it today, and it's terrible. It is not good. It is not a modern, developed website. You can actually look at the HTML, and it's HTML, and it's just not fit for purpose. And I get that it is, the volunteer positions and all that, but the society makes decent money. Yeah. And really, I think the crux of it is, what is it for? I didn't see value in the IPMS back in the 90s. I don't see value in the IPMS for me as a modeler. Now, I don't see it presenting like, helping out younger modelers, helping out intermediate modelers. It does feel very much for the old guard, and I get why it existed before, when societies were a big thing, when the internet didn't exist, but there wasn't YouTube, there wasn't that information and stuff. And that's fine, but times change. And given that when we had this discussion at my physical club was before the internet, right? That doesn't really hold out, that it still felt out of touch back then, Anyway, I could see Brian. Thank you for joining, sir.
Hello, Alex. How you doing?
I'm very casual, as you can see tonight.
All I got's a black under t-shirt on, so.
Well, I was just explaining to the chat that I managed to resurrect my petrol mower and actually have a go at the garden just before the premiere of the video, which meant I had to get in the shower before coming on, because it was a grimy, petrol-fueled, sweaty experience.
Yeah, I've been dealing with a pressure washer myself, a gas-powered pressure washer. And about 3 weeks ago, I hadn't run it in, I know, a year and a half. I drug it out the shed, tore the carburetor off of it, cleaned it out, got it running top notch. Got home yesterday from work after almost 13 hours. I'm like, I'm going to pressure wash the truck. It's getting pretty raunchy before I take it to the car wash. And put some gas in it. Out there. All of a sudden, gas coming out of the bowl. I'm like, what? The bowl seal is shot. It was just completely shot. And I was like, oh my God. And then it's a 25-year-old pressure washer. You can't Google it.
Yeah. It's the most frustrating thing, though, isn't it? When you think it's just, especially when you know what's wrong with it, and you just think, all I need is, a seal.
Yes, that's all I need. Yeah. And then I went to a local outdoor repair place, equipment repair place, and I was like, I need a lawnmower blade. Asked me, did you even sell a Craftsman lawnmower blade? Well, yeah, which one do you have? And I told him. She said, well, you got an old push mower too, don't you? Yeah. Yeah. I don't buy it until I got to.
Oh dear.
I didn't get to see that whole presentation video. I was waiting on the power to come back on. I had maybe got 5 minutes into it, but I'll go ahead and vote you as IPMS national president.
I think that might be a shock too far for people. But no, I mean, are you a member of the IPMS, Brian?
Yes. And
I know it's a bit different in the US, the structure, right?
Well, I really don't know much about IPMS, honestly. I was out modeling scene for well over 30 years. And I only got back into it back in, I think it was the fall of 19 that I got back in 2019, back into modeling. And really, I only joined because my local brick and mortar hobby store offered a 10% discount to IPMS members. That was really the really, and then I wound up, I bought almost nothing from them. I go to the shows and I get kits at better prices than, even with a 10% discount. So yeah, unless it's a brand new kit, then I will take advantage of the 10% discount. So yeah.
Yeah, because we had Jim on Airfix and Chill on Monday, who has been with the IPMS and is one of the class category judges. I think 148 scale jets. I think I may be wrong on the exact category. Mm-hmm. And he was talking about some of the way that the IPMS runs competitions and things. And we had a similar discussion last week as well on what the IPMS is for these days. In the UK, we just got this little booklet, which is the annual general meeting minutes. It has all of the accounts in there, and it has some really interesting kind of results, if you like. The general membership doesn't actually pay for the cost of Scale Model World, which is the big show we have here. That's actually covered by the entrance fees and traders. The magazine actually costs a tremendous amount of money to both make it and to mail it out. And, it is even if it was the best magazine in the world, right, it's going to be limited in its scope because there's only so many articles you can get in there. So, for instance, I got one actually serendipitously today. And there's a few articles in there, but I mean, I don't think there was anything on car modeling in this episode. So
yeah, the IPMS, there's not that, and that is one thing that I have noticed, that with IPMS, there's not a lot in the magazine when it covering car modeling. Yeah, it seems to be mainly focused, largely military, especially armor and planes.
Yeah, which I kind of get, because that is the bulk, if you like, of modeling at least in the West. Obviously, if we incorporated Japan into the, again, it's a bit odd because it's the international, obviously with the UK branch of the IPMS, but if we incorporated Japan, there's an awful lot of Gundam, manga, that kind of stuff there, which you don't see at all really here. Sci-fi is quite underrepresented, and again, it kind of led me to this question of well, the same discussion I had 25 years ago with people in my physical club. What is the IPMS for anymore? It's not the same world that back in the 60s, back in the 70s. Completely get it, right? Like-minded people, you get a magazine, you get hints and tips and stuff, which is great because there weren't really any other places to get that. It was books, other magazines that you paid for, which, were generally subject focused. The idea of a general society that could organize local clubs and stuff, very much of the time. But as time goes on, as technology develops, it kind of becomes increasingly divergent from what people are actually going to for their source of information, like YouTube, like the internet.
Yeah.
Graham says, has the IPMS got a website? Yes, it does.
I gotta move my sprinkler.
In the UK, in the video, I said, the 1990s called it wants its website back, because it really hasn't changed, and that's how it is. It's very text heavy, doesn't really. I can't imagine what it looks like on a mobile. I doubt anybody's checked. It's just this basic lack of understanding of how people are consuming things now. And no, we don't want to lose things like, the physical part. I know it's harder in the US because you're geographically just bigger. But in the UK, we want to keep the local clubs and stuff. But what does being affiliated with the IPMS do for that? You can get a group together on Discord, arrange to meet physically at a pub or something. You don't need insurance, So it was really a kind of examination of that. And really what I just applied a tool that I've used in business before to the IPMS, like really examining, well, what is it for? And once you really determine what you're for, that should really filter everything that you do. Because if you're doing something that doesn't actually put that core tenet of what you're for.
Yeah, I have, I'm a member of a local modeling club at, excuse me. And we're IPMS sanctioned. I don't know what the benefit is. I have no idea. The only benefit I know of is if you want to be if they have an opening as a president, vice president, somebody like that, you have to be an IPMS member.
Yeah,
that's the only benefit I know of. And I don't have a big club. I guess maybe, we meet once a month, but the most I've seen there is maybe 15 or 20 people, but it is a 2-state club.
Yeah.
So people come from 2 states to come to it. And my understanding, there are people that live, 1 or 2 hours away that just don't come, that are members, but I wouldn't know any of them.
Yeah, so it's the IPMS to me is a bit of a not that it's at a crisis point, because I don't think it realizes that the great majority of modelers. I mean, I would love to see the statistics in this. Unfortunately, it doesn't give that. How many people joined the IPMS like I did just before Scale Model World? Because entry to the Scale Model World here is free if you're a member of the IPMS.
I've never heard.
So
Scale Model World.
Yeah, Scale Model World is our big show in the UK. So we have like 3 halls in Telford. We get a lot of European attendance as well. So it's like,
So is that, because when I Google it, it says Scale Model World IPMS UK.
Yes. Yeah. That's right. So held in a place called Telford, which you would have never have heard of if you're in the US, I'm sure. A lot of people in the UK haven't either.
So Scale Model World is I don't know what happened. Scale Model World is, by a quick look, Scale Model World was a separate entity, and then it became an IPMS chapter.
No, Scale Model World is the show of.
Oh, it's just okay.
IPMS UK. So
the IPMS sanctioned show is because we have
It's the big one in the UK, held every November.
Okay. I heard, I listened into some of y'all's discussion the other day, and I know you had the American, and he was over in Phoenix, and he was talking about the travel distances, and
Yeah.
I mean, to go to a national show like this year, I think it's up in Madison, Wisconsin. I mean, I'm limited on my budget. I sure couldn't afford to fly. It would, if I drove it straight, I mean, nonstop, except for bathroom breaks and gas. It's probably 14 to 16 hour nonstop drive.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. It's quite, I mean, you know, some people, there's a couple of podcasts in America that I've listened to. Some of them attend, that's like the only show they go to a year. And maybe one other one that's in their local area. I mean, I'm in the southeast of the U.S. So luckily I have a good 6 shows that are, the furthest one is about a 4-hour drive from my house. And I'll make a weekend out of, there's 2 shows I make a full weekend out of, which is the Acme Atlanta Car Model Enthusiasts, which is an NNL show, IPMS sanctioned club, but they don't do IPMS. They the builders vote. You get a card, pick 5, and you put it in a box, and they go tally them up. The two IPMS sanctioned shows I go to that are, one of them you get the medallions, and if your build is good enough, you get bronze, silver, or gold.
Yeah.
And then they do have the best of categories, and then the other one is they do top 3 in each category, and that's it. And then they have a best of for each category. And this year was the first year they put Gundams in, and it's not me, but it was nice to see different people.
Yeah.
You know, they were a little gamey-ish looking.
Yeah, I mean, to me, the Gundam doesn't do it. You know, it's like, I mean, if I'm going to go down that route of the kind of sci-fi robot stuff, I think some of the like the Dust, which is like, you know, sort of like 1947 kind of, you know, like if World War II hadn't ended, kind of extended, got into anti-gravity propulsion and stuff. You know, it's that kind of thing, which is more kind of high tech, and it looks realistic. You know,
right? But I'll say some of them is like, wow. But the thing about it is, them coming to a model show like you know, the this particular show I was talking about, you know, of course they do everything. Could it spark their interest into a car, into a plane?
Yeah.
Is there that possibility? So I mean, it can definitely help promote and grow the hobby. It's all, after all, it's plastic.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, this is kind of one of the other bugbears I have about the IPMS is the P bit, is plastic, right? Because so one of the things, and this came from a judge, not Jim, it was, I think, the UK, one of the UK judging secretary here, talking about what was and what wasn't allowed in the IPMS competition. So resin models are okay, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, as somebody with a chemistry and biochemistry background, resin is not plastic. It has none of the attributes of a plastic, right? Chemically, it is a completely separate entity.
Right.
White metal is closer to plastic than resin is, right? Because actually white metal, especially lower melting point things, you can, you know, like a thermoplastic where you can melt it and it softens and you can reform it and all those kind of things. You know, it's just a different structure, a different, it's elemental really,
Right.
rather than a polymer. So the whole like plastic bit is just like, well, that doesn't make sense that you're not allowing something here, like a white metal car wouldn't be allowed, but a 3D printed resin tank would. It's just like, to me, that makes no sense. And what does it matter? I don't care what somebody makes a model of. If you can carve out of driftwood something which can compete with an injection molded car or plane, more power to you. The end result to me is the important thing.
Yeah. And I see your point, but I also understand too that, so a metal body like a die cast, my understanding, it's allowed as long as it's not, you don't take the die cast, strip it and paint it. If you modify it, like you'd say, you just use strictly the body, you strip it and you repaint it and then you build the chassis for it. My understanding, that's allowed. Maybe it's just the one Acme show I go to. That I don't know. I'm not positive on that, but I know that they do allow it as long as you modify it, and it's not just open the box, strip the paint, put it back together, and repaint it.
Yeah, like a corgi toy or something.
Yeah.
I get that, but I just think the way that, certainly the way the society is perceived, I mean, my perception, other people I've talked to who either haven't joined the IPMS or, like me, join it just to go to a show, because I go for the 2 days. It's a 2-day show over the weekend in Telford, which is about a 4-hour drive for me. So, I'll go on the Friday, I get a cheap bed and breakfast for 2 nights, and I can spend the whole weekend, get there first thing on a Saturday. Members get in an hour earlier as well, so you get a bit of time to go around and look at stuff before it gets too crowded. I can catch up with friends. To me, that's one of the big things. That's catching up with people.
That's the best part to me for the shows is the camaraderie.
Yeah,
and hugging a neck you ain't seen in a while. Shaking a hand. That's the best part. I thoroughly enjoyed just getting to go let loose for like you say, 2 days.
Yeah. I mean, I saw a guy that I've not seen physically, obviously connected with on Facebook and stuff, but it's not the same as physically seeing someone. Haven't seen him for almost 20 years since I moved away from the northwest of the UK. Fantastic. I mean, we must have spent like an hour and a half, just going through stuff. Our kids were little when we last spoke, and now they're kind of grown up, and we kind of all the stuff that he worked for Games Workshop for about 14 years, actually Forge World, the resin sort of casting department of them. He was a sculptor for them, and just talking about that, just fantastic to catch up. I caught up with Moss and Sully and Lexi, Miss Modeler, went round some of that stuff, saw the guys at Airfix, caught up with quite a few people actually who watched the channel, which was very humbling actually. And thank you if anybody's on that says hello. That's always a great thing. And get feedback from that as well. I didn't go to buy anything, so I actually didn't take any cash with me. I did end up buying a couple of kits anyway, because it's impossible to resist.
I've told myself the last couple of shows, I do not need another kit. I don't even have anywhere to put a kit, and I still come home with 2 or 3. I'm like, where am I going to put it? I don't know. Because I got a whole wall over here, and I don't have nowhere else to put stuff. So my wife says, well, you put them up here. Yeah, but when that display case is full, I need to hang my other display case over here. Where am I going to put those?
You need to open a shop. That's what it is, Brian. That's what I did.
Then I got a friend of mine, the Florida IPMS chapter president, was killed in a car wreck.
Oh no, that's
and he didn't really have any kits, but his friend was in the car, and his friend had been buying and buying and buying and buying and buying and getting ready for retirement. He literally had thousands, probably 5,000 kits.
Wow.
So he's in Florida. My friend lives in Florida, and he's trying to help offload all these kits and getting a great price on them. I knew all the car model stuff, regardless, was $15 a kit.
Yeah.
And I jumped on like 9, I think, and somebody's buying me one. So I'm like, I don't know why. I don't know why am I doing this? Why? But he has. I promise you, Alex, he probably has close to 3,000 plain kits, and he's buying all this stuff up, just getting ready for retirement. So when he retires, he didn't build any. He was waiting to retire so he could build. And it was literally years from retirement. And apparently there was a truck, a 18-wheeler parked in the travel lanes with no lights on in the middle of the night. Boom, right in the back at 70 mile an hour.
That only ends one way, unfortunately, doesn't it?
Yeah, and they don't know what the truck left.
Oh, Jesus. That's bad. That's bad. No, it's I mean, completely aside from modeling and stuff, it's one of those things that life has 100% death rate. It's just a matter of when and how, and I think we are very much insulated from that today as a society. In the past, even if you look back like 100 years, death was much more prevalent, much more in people's faces, like workplace accidents, wars. Of course, World War I had just gone by. Of course, they didn't know World War II was just on the horizon, but it was much more commonplace. Disease, we only just had antibiotics, and 50 years before that, of course, late Victorian time, people had 10, 12 children because they knew most of them would probably die. Yeah. That's not the case now. So it's always more shocking because we do tend to insulate ourselves from it a lot more. But it's rough. It's rough. Yeah. I mean, I lost my father.
I'll be right back.
Yeah, sure. Well, actually, that gives me a good chance to go into the comments because I know there have been quite a few comments while I've been chatting to Brian. It's just getting up to where I was before. Okay, here we go. So, Julian, thanks for doing that. Looking at the IPMS website on the phone, borderline unusable. Yeah, I suspected as much. So again, if you're using any sort of professional service, so for the shop, for instance, I use Shopify. Shopify is designed to have specific versions incorporated for the device that people are browsing on. So if they're browsing on a phone, it presents differently than how it looks on, a PC or laptop. So I doubt the IPMS has looked at that. Well, it sounds like from what you've talked about, it hasn't. Which, of course, what's the one tool that 99% of people under 50 use? It's a phone. So,
yeah.
Daniel says, I had a horrible experience with an IPMS chapter. They thought God created them on the release day. Yeah, I must admit, I only have my own anecdotal experience of, my own and those people around me. But it has been almost universally that kind of thing, very aloof and elitist kind of. Because as I say, I used to live in the northwest of the UK, which it seems like a long way away. It's not by US standards, but it was, 3.5 hours from where I currently live, maybe 4. But there I had a non-IPMS model club. Really, really nice group of guys. The guy who used to work at Games Workshop, he used to be a professional modeler in the 90s. Superb modeler, incredibly humble guy. One of the nicest people you could ever meet. Lovely guy. And the club was very much like that to a man. You know, we just got together. I always used to take a model with me. I almost never ended up doing anything to it because we just chatted. It was like it was like going to the pub or the bar, you know, with a group of friends. You just had that common interest in modeling. But, you know, we talked for the 3.5 hours that we were together, you know, and then went home. So when I moved to the Southwest, I wanted to join a local model club. So looked up the IPMS because I'd been to the show, so I had membership, and went to the local club. I won't say where it was because, you know, that was a long time ago, and I don't want to sully the reputation of a club now, which might have completely changed. But I went there, and it felt very officious and starchy, you know, kind of very like the rules were the most important thing. It felt like going to work. You know, it felt like a work meeting rather than, you know, a group of like-minded friends, you know. So guess what? I didn't stick with it. I went a couple of times and just like, yeah, you know, this isn't for me. Whereas I really think it's incumbent on a society which is supposed to be, you know, fostering and promoting the hobby to make that as an enjoyable experience as possible, to be as welcoming as possible to people who are, especially those that have just moved to the area, right? Because they don't know anybody. So this is your one big chance to make a good impression. So it's a shame when people have like this experience that Daniel had, of them thinking themselves, you know, sitting on the right hand side of God the Father, kind of thing.
I want to answer a question up in chat from Ari Styrie. That's Andrew. I just want to let him know that if you ask Fred that, you know the answer. The 67 Chevelle Pro Street.
I'm just trying to find the question now. People in the chat will know I'm terrible at finding questions. What is the best car kit that AMT makes?
He's joking. It's a complete joke. Because
I was going to say AMT. I mean, they're not the greatest manufacturer in the world of anything, really, are they? I know they do a lot of cars, but
the problem is they're using molds that are 50 years old.
Yeah.
They re-release, which is great. Just try to clean them up a little bit. I mean, just a little bit would be nice. And when I first got back in the hobby, I met somebody through one of the Facebook groups, and he told me, stay away from AMT. And he said, especially until you get experience. Well, I only had 2 kits, and one of them I didn't know I had. I had come across it and I had painted the body. And while I'm learning how to strip Tester's rattle can enamel, it's probably been on there for, I don't know, 5 or 6 years. I started building an AMT kit, and it did not have good fitment, and I learned quickly. And I went back, I bought another one, a different AMT kit, and the flash was just horrid. It was horrid. It was terrible. Terrible. I'm talking about the half of the tree, the sprue was flashing. You had to dig the parts out of the flashing from the entire sprue tree and then carve the part out. It was horrific. It was really horrific. Turned into a nice model, but it was only about my fourth or fifth one I'd built, and I had to put a lot of effort into it. A lot.
Yeah, that's kind of learning trial by fire, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's kind of like, especially with some parts, when you get, I always feel like it would have been easier to scratch build some of the pieces once you've actually, you know, by the time you cut away all the flash and then you're cleaning up the seams. And quite often on those, you know, especially with older kits, you know, say you've got some thin cylindrical part, but actually it's slightly mismatched. So you've got a clean seams on both sides and build it up, and you're sort of left with a weird oval. You just think, it'd been easy if I just made this from scratch with plastic rod.
Yeah.
No matter what, a better result.
And when you you talk about scratching, something I wanted to get it mentioned to you when you was talking about the IPMS, how they allow resin. A lot of people pour resin parts, to reduplicate engine parts and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
How do you know it's not resin? It's not a duplicated resin part. And then I've heard people especially the show I've gone to in Florida, where they say resin is cheating. If you're resin printing, you're cheating. It's still, I look at it as it's a model of something, whether it's plastic model, like you said, metal. If you whittle it out of wood, you're modeling something. It's a model.
Yeah. And the weird thing is that there are categories now at the IPMS in the UK for the big national show, which aren't really models at all. They're like flat. I can't remember what they are, but they're basically like bas relief pictures. And it's like, well, how is that a model and yet
So
you don't allow metal like cars?
It's like what I haven't had no dealings with them, but they're sort of like they're a raised decal. I know they're used a lot in planes.
Oh yeah, like the 3D, the Edward.
Yeah. Is it something like that?
No, it's just a picture. So they're framed, and there'll be like a picture, but the picture is like raised, and it's like I'm
And
just
then
thinking, yeah, they paint it and stuff, but it's like it's not a model. It's not a three-dimensional, like two-sided model. I can't remember what the category is called. I'll have to try and look it up. But it's just like, because I remember seeing them, and they're quite interesting. I took photos. I should look at my own video actually, because I've got them all on there. But it's just like, that's very different.
yeah. I definitely haven't seen anything like that at any of my shows that I've attended.
I'm going to have to find what it is now. Okay, I'm looking on YouTube, and of course, my most recent one has come up. No, I have to go to studio, aren't I? Is that the sprinkler again?
No, that's an email. I just went out there and turned it off instead of move it.
What is the weather like over there at the moment, Brian?
So I don't know what the Celsius is, but I know it's supposed to get up to about 90 today.
Oof! Wow. Okay. Yeah, that's warm.
It's 86. It feels like 91, but that's cool yet. Wait. June is generally a really hot, dry month. So about mid-June through about mid-July. And then after July, the temperature starts to come down, or about mid-July, temperature starts to come in, but the humidity goes way up. And it could be 95 to 100 outside, and it would feel like 115. It's awful. Of course, that's part of the joys of living in the Southeast United States.
Are you actually in Florida then?
No, I'm in Georgia. I'm just north.
Okay, Georgia. Okay. Yeah.
So Celsius is 30 degrees Celsius.
Yeah.
It ain't even hot yet.
We might not get to that. Okay, the category is IPMS category 61, flat figures, any scale. But
flat figures.
Let me show you on if I can manage to do this on StreamYard, because I'm terrible at doing this. Let's see if I can share the screen. Here we go. You see that?
It's just a painting to me.
Apparently that is a flat figure. Let me mute this, because otherwise it might create some horrible... Okay, so we got all the boats. I basically went, oh, here we go, see?
Yeah,
So
to me, that just looks like a painting. I hate to say it, but it almost looks like paint by numbers.
yeah, I mean, this is a category. I mean, I think it is. To me, that is not. I think where the category started is in like the old, like lead type, flat figures that you used to get from the Napoleonics way back. But to me, they're not models, right? So yeah, I think the IPMS has always seemed to me, my interactions with it have always been, it seems that the letter of the law is more important than the spirit, which is the exact opposite of the way I generally operate.
I just don't know. I really don't know enough to comment on it. I really, really don't. I wish I did, I don't know enough about them. I don't think there's any consistencies. Like in your presentation video before you actually went live, you talked about feedback. There are some shows here in the States that do offer feedback, and they'll put it on your card. But one of the feedback criticisms I got was inconsistent detail, and that's all it said.
Yeah, which is
where is my inconsistency? That way I can improve on it.
Yeah.
The other feedback I knew was coming, especially if they were going to shine a flashlight on it. I knew they were going to see some specks in the paint, and I knew that was coming. But other than that, it's a fantastic model, and even the flames were painted on. But that's what happens when you let your airbrush run low on paint and it spits while you're in the middle of doing a beautiful fade paint job. And yeah, there was no way I was stripping that thing and starting over. No way. Without feedback, how can you improve?
Yeah, I mean, I think, and that goes back to my original premise of, I really think they need to, as a society, because, I mean, you say you don't have, enough knowledge of it to comment. To me, that is indicative of the problem, right? You've gone on fine without really having deep interactions with the IPMS. I have got on absolutely fine, having almost no interactions with no interactions with the IPMS for the past 25 years. The only interaction being going to IPMS shows, which you don't have to be a member to do,
Right.
And the people I've met at the individual shows are fantastic,
Right. Oh yeah.
It's the bureaucracy, and when you get into that kind of, it's a bit like politics, right? Career politicians, it's just like that shouldn't be allowed. Yeah, nobody should be allowed to be a politician until they've actually had a real job, real experience of life, and then maybe they get to go into politics and talk about
and have some success at it too as well. Yeah. At least a little bit.
Yeah, not lose as more money than you would have done just by putting your millions donated by your father into an interest account.
Well, that's a different type of story. He's had a lot of success. I'm referring to ones that were street bums, and didn't become something until they got their first job working for the government at defects, Department of Family and Children's Services. I mean, those are the ones that I really refer to.
Well, I have the greatest of sympathy. I mean, we've just had a local by-election here, so we have what they call by-elections, where you elect local councils, and it's usually used as a barometer for a national election. See how that's going to go. I'm sure you have it's like the primaries or something in the US.
Yeah,
too au fait with US politics. But I mean, just like you, we have a general election coming up, which, I mean, you look at the choices and it's just like, it's not great. But I have to look at you guys and say, I mean, you've got the devil of the deep blue sea, haven't you? It's just like, that's it's not a great choice.
I don't. I try to stay out of politics when it comes to modeling.
Yeah.
But that being said, when it comes to both of our candidates, you don't get the true information. You just don't. You get pro one and hate the other one. And that comes from the news media.
Yeah.
They're very, very biased.
I've said for a long time that the problem with the way that representative democracy is run in the West, really for the past, well, for as long as I've been alive, is it's just become tribal. It's party politics. It's not even about policies, because you don't really know what the policies are necessarily or what are going to be enacted. It's just you have this campaign run by market people, not even politicians, marketeers, who just run slur campaigns against the other candidate. It's like, how is that relevant to getting my roads fixed?
Yeah.
It's just like, I don't really care. If the guy dyes his hair, it's just like, whatever. Is he going to fix the roads? Is he going to
do your job?
Yeah.
Don't just tax me to spend it on undeserving people.
Yeah, and I think that actually, keeping the politics out of modeling is again, I think, another the reason that the IPMS people tend to shy away, because, and again, I can only talk about the UK and my experiences. The feeling is of that, the administration, the bureaucracy, which people don't want in their hobby. They want to get together with people, talk about the subjects that they enjoy, the cars, the kits, the planes, the tanks, whatever it is. What model companies are releasing, what they like, and have a bit of a banter and camaraderie. They don't want to think about they've got enough problems, right? You don't want to bring problems into your hobby as well.
Right. And and that's, I do a weekly live, and we'll make a passing joke, but I don't want it to be a topic, because when I'm at the model bench, that's what I want to do.
Yeah.
I built a model so I can forget about all these crazy people out here in the world, the Karens and whatnot. So I don't want to hear for I have 6-7 hour streams. I don't want that crap. I just don't want it. I don't want it.
And there's enough on YouTube, right? I mean, you can go and see, the US's greatest Karens YouTube videos. Or like, I sometimes do watch them.
I've seen some British Karens.
Oh yeah. Oh no.
I saw one raising hell because his window was open, and he was cooking or something. She didn't like the smell. I was like, what the hell is wrong with you? I thought we had some bad ones.
I mean, that covers it all, doesn't it? It's just like, what the hell is wrong with these people? It's just like, live and let live. Yeah. It's like, close your own window so you don't smell it.
Exactly.
Engage this muscle, the big grey one in your skull. Yeah. Oh no, there are definitely some UK ones, but I guess we like watching, in the UK at least, some of the US stuff, because it seems to be more extreme. Ours tend to be a bit tea and biscuits, like our cops stuff. It's like you might get pepper sprayed and stuff. There's no shootouts.
Well,
I mean, I know that generally aren't in the US.
That's true, but not all cops are allowed to have a gun either, which I find fascinating. It's weird.
Would you like to be the guy? It's just like, oh yeah, you're going out with Davies. Yeah, he can't carry a gun. It's like, whoa, wait a minute. Why? It's like, What's wrong with him? And what happens if you come and go to the bad guy who's got one? It's just like, just run.
I know, right? I'm not allowed to have a gun, but the perp's got a knife. What am I supposed to do?
It's like you got a stab vest, you'll be fine.
Yeah, I got a bulletproof vest on. It don't do no good against the knife. Not a good sharp knife.
So Graham has commented, look at some of the comments on this and other streams. It would be nice to know if the people who join the IPMS just for entry to the show do any check out their local IPMS, etc. It's a very good question. Now, personally, Graham, I don't. And one of the reasons is I'm unluckily, I always seem to end up living in places which are equidistant between like 3 clubs, you know. So maybe it's because I live in the southwest of the UK, which is rural. It's very beautiful. We don't have the best roads.
You need water?
Yeah.
So, you know, to drive 10 miles will take 20 minutes, you know, to drive to a club which is 25 minutes away, 25 miles away. It's like an hour to each of my local IPMS clubs. For me, taking a chance on that, it's just like, that's 2 hours of driving, you know, one each way, to meet a group of people that I don't know whether I'll get on with, you know, with all the associated costs and losing out an evening. I would rather spend that time modeling, if I'm going to do that at home, or spending it with my girlfriend. So again, I don't see the value in going to a local IPMS club. Now, partially that's because I have been burned before. If I had one which was, you know, close by, like Brian says, you know, he goes to one once a month. If I had one that was, you know, 35 minutes away or so, met once a month, was a really good group of guys, really welcoming, knowledgeable, you know, and there was a reason for going, then sure I would. But for me, it's not for the society to prove, but once you've been bitten by an experience, you kind of do need that outreach, you know. And one of the things that the IPMS has often said is, you know, it struggles to attract new members. It's just like, well, it needs to look at why. You know, what is it offering people? And again, if the IPMS UK, if their website was a modern website like Scalemates and had lots of information, and I could go up and look up like tips and tricks on car modeling, for instance, because I'm doing that Corvair Monza, Brian, and oh my God.
What's wrong with that kit? Because I had never heard of that brand.
Yeah, it's actually a Japanese brand. Edai is the original tooler. Entex were a US distributor of it, basically, or Reboxer. It's really basic inside, so
yeah.
really super basic.
Trying to make something from a turd. Is that what you're trying to do?
Yeah.
I mean, it looked from your open box, it looked like the interior had some detail. It's just making it work. Yeah,
it's kind of, it's got the seats and it's got the instrument panel and the, you know, gear shift and, you know, steering wheel stuff. And it's got the engine. The trouble is there's nothing between any of those pieces. So there's just voids between that and the outer shell of the doors, for instance. So it's just like, okay.
Yeah, the engine was really just a molded top piece of the engine. It wasn't like a block, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So the whole rear of the car hinges like it does on the real thing, because basically the whole front hinges forward and the whole back hinges forward on the real thing, which GM still have. But you couldn't do that. I'm just going to seal it up to see as little as possible.
Right.
Because it's just a flat piece that just rests.
You're going to turn it into a true curbside. Just to me, a glue and be done. Yeah.
But even that on the, you know, the engraving on it's not too bad, you know, for the what do you call it, the hood and stuff. But when you actually look at it in a bit more detail, it's different doing an unboxing, even if you're looking in detail, than when you come to build the kit, when you kind of get to know it intimately. And then you see the sink marks, and it's just like, okay. And there's like at least 3 on the outside of the rear. And it's like, okay, I'm going to have to deal with all of those.
On the I guess the hood, the engine cover?
On the rear rather than the hood at the front, on the
engine cover, on the rear engine cover. Really?
Yeah. And it's just like, okay. It's
and that's honestly, I haven't done a lot of, I don't think I've done a Fujimi kit. I've done one at Aoshima. I've done a bunch of Revell via Monogram. I haven't done a Revell Germany kit. Couple AMT kits, and I've very seldomly seen that on the outside of the body where I've got bad sink marks. I've seen videos where people have had issues with it, but me personally, I've just the worst one I had was the AMT 55 Chevy Bel Air kit, where the trunk rolled around to the back where the actual taillights would be. The 55 has a long deck lid that comes down towards the bumper, and I had to fill that, prime it, fill it, prime it, recarve the panel line, and recarve it. It was a lot of work. That was one of the worst body experiences I've had to deal with. But in the long run, it took your time with it, and it came out. It was a bad spot right in the curve of the deck lid too, and the 55 has got a real hard trunk line that comes down. It was difficult to do, very difficult, but I worked with it. I haven't, other than that, I really haven't had a lot of those type of issues on a car, on the body pieces itself.
They're not terrible. It's just there's at least 3, and it is quite a curved structure, that rear of the car.
Yeah.
So it's just like, it's more work than I had anticipated. That's probably the way of putting it. And the tires, they need quite a bit of work. Hence the question on the stream.
You don't have access to somebody that can 3D print something in your area?
Oh yeah, I've got like 5 resin 3D printers myself. But
oh, you do?
Yeah. I kind of want to keep it as
Colts 3D. There you go.
Yeah, I got the exhaust nozzles for an F15, the Tamiya F15. Printed those out. They were fabulous. Look absolutely wonderful.
Yeah, I love my print.
$9.
I don't build much, but when I print something, just the quality, the detail is I don't care. You got people that truly believe, if it ain't scratched, it ain't a model. You go make 4 wheels and tires that look identical with some plastic. It ain't gonna happen. Gonna happen. You can try, but I wouldn't. I had a friend that got me into it about 2 years ago when I was building a lot more time. And since then, I've upgraded twice on my printer. I originally had the Anycubic Photon Mono.
Yep.
Then I upgraded to the 4K, and now I got the M5S, and I love it. I got a friend. If a friend calls me, hey, can you do this for me? Yeah. I ain't gonna charge you. That being said, don't put a time limit on me.
Yeah. I'm the same. Yeah. I've got the so actually I started off with Anycubic. I've now got Frozen, the 8K Mini, which is a fabulous machine. And I've just got their 8K Mega, which has a huge, like the print bed is like, what, 15 inches by 12 or something? It's huge.
Right.
You could print like a 1/12 scale car in shell on it in one piece if you wanted.
Wow.
I've not commissioned that yet. It's sitting at work. I'm going to print figures and accessories and stuff for the shop rather than I'll keep the 8K Mini for myself at home. I didn't want to transport them between because once you've got resin in them, it's a pain to move them, as you know.
Yeah, I don't clean it unless, hell, that 4K mono I had, I left resin in it for 2 or 3 months. Took a silicone spatula and mixed it around, went to print.
Yeah. I did exactly so. I don't generally print over the winter because the printers are out in my garage, my man cave, which is a converted garage, which although insulated, it's still obviously lower temperatures mess up your exposure times and things. You need longer exposures. Your resin doesn't cure as quickly. And I don't really want to mess with that. I don't want to heat. Well, I can't afford at the moment to heat the garage all winter. So I don't tend to do as much printing during the winter. So yeah, it sat for like 4 months. The resin in there. The top's on, the UV shield and everything. And I did exactly the same. I just mixed it up, make sure there weren't any, pieces and bits and lumps in there. Kind of it's separated out a little bit because
it's like a white film on the bottom, and the rest of it will be dark gray.
Yeah, all the pigment.
I want to answer Gary T. I've heard that question come up many a time. Will 3D printing eventually mean the end of traditional model kits? It's almost at the bottom of the chat.
Okay. Oops. I just missed it. Nope.
Up higher.
There we go. No, people, stop writing comments. I keep missing it.
Up higher. But there you go. I cannot see how.
No.
Simply because you can't mass produce in a timely manner resin. Even if you're pouring it and using a vacuum mold, there's still a lot of time involved in mixing the resin, pouring the resin, and waiting. With plastic, you inject it, it cools off quick, and you're done. You pull the die apart and it's done. There's definitely, I think, growing space for the part side. I think we've only just begun, and I'm just getting into modeling. I've been back building about 5 years. I think the designs that can come from it are still yet to be seen. I think there'll be some good opportunity for some one-off kits. Like I got a friend of mine, somebody in Florida paid him to design a one. He now sells it on Colts 3D, but it was a 32 Ford pickup. So he designed, he put the 30, what he had for a 32 Ford, and then he made a bed out of it, put nitrous bottles and everything, fully detailed. He won best of show at it. Wow. With it. And so things like that, the one-off stuff, or if you're willing to pay for an STL file, I think he charges like $80 for it. And then you've got all the time that it takes you to support it, all the time, it takes you to clean it. Resin will never replace the plastic kit.
No, not with current technology. So Gary, if you've not seen my video on what is the best model company in the world, the first part of that, I go through exactly that point, because one of the first criteria I applied was the company has to be producing injected molded styrene kits. And I explained why, because there are a huge number are kind of cottage industry suppliers now, making like cast resin, cast molds have been made of 3D prints that are then cast because you can scale it up a little bit more, or just straight 3D printed kits, but it isn't scalable. So, and I go through like with all of the, as is my want, I go through all of the costs and all of the time. Is the time more than anything? So of the scale up compared to injection molding, the average sprue frame on an injection molding machine takes about 60 seconds to produce.
Yeah, okay. And see, and Terry over at Little History says that in 10 years' time there'll be no model kit companies. I really, really highly doubt that. I really do. Same friend of mine, he put up I think a 32 Ford, and he actually got hit by Ford for a copyright because he said he thinks it was just a Ford emblem. He took it down, he took that off and put it back up. It's still up there. It's just because it ain't got the Ford logo.
Yeah. So the resolution. Okay, so I'll address a couple of things here. So better resolution. We have hit the maximum resolution you need, right? 20 microns is about where printing is. It depends on the bed size and a whole bunch of other things. But you cannot distinguish layer lines. 20 microns. It's as good as is injection molding. The quality isn't there. It doesn't matter. It's the scalability. It doesn't matter how fast you can print. You still need to clean and cure the resin afterwards. Mm-hmm. It's messy. That has added cost. The solvent costs. So IPA, if you're using IPA to clean your models, methanol is also possible. It's not as good. Just the IPA volumes involved in producing like a basic run of 5,000 kits run into thousands of liters, after which you can't use that IPA. It has to be disposed of, and
it's got to be properly disposed of.
Yeah.
I mean,
the health and safety stuff.
Yeah. As a personal printer, like for personal self, I can reuse resin. Stick it in a glass bottle. Mm-hmm. The alcohol. Of course, I don't use alcohol-based resin anymore. I use water washable. Stick it out in the sunlight and reuse the alcohol. But when you're talking like Alex is talking about, thousands of, in my case, gallons, that would be virtually impossible to they would come out cheaper and more time consuming paying somebody to haul off the hazardous waste, and it's still got to be disposed of.
Styrene can be recycled, even though a lot of places don't do it because it's so cheap to use just fresh styrene, which is kind of a sad thing environmentally. But
styrene comes from crude oil. Crude oil, that's why kits have gone up in price, because crude oil prices have gone up.
Yeah, well, maybe recycling will become
recycled plastic in with crude too. So
but I mean, it's just the scale and speed of production. 3D printing as well, as I mentioned, is temperature sensitive. So it means you can't just put a bunch of 3D printers in a warehouse. It has to be a temperature controlled environment. It has to have sufficient like solvent extraction to get rid of all the volatile organic compounds, the VOCs. Somebody has to operate it all. It's quite an intensive process. Again, when you're doing it as a cottage industry, if you're just making one kit a day or a couple of kits a week or something as a personal or a cottage industry producer, that's fine. But if somebody asks you to make 5,000 of something, that's a completely different, that's a small run.
Completely, right? That's a completely, and Terry says again, 10 years, a lot can change. I can't see it. No. I can't see it.
It won't happen.
I think
unless there's a change in the technology. If there's a change in the technology, maybe
it would have to be a massive.
Yeah,
massive.
Now doesn't need curing, doesn't need. Effectively, if you could produce the same kind of workflow as injection molding, in a 3D printer. So if you had the convenience of a filament printer with the detail of a resin printer and the speed of 10 times that, then you're talking about something that could be competitive.
Yeah, yeah.
But
I could see a day where your companies like AMT and Revell maybe do start to offer some of their older stuff as an STL file. I could see that possibly happening, and that would be great. And I mean, if you like, we said earlier, where AMT's literally using molds that are 40 and 50 years old. If they supplied it as an STL file, it would just bring the kit back to life, back to what it was, with the sharp and crisp detail. And but there would come an issue of people selling it. Which
I think the problem becomes the
thing.
Yeah, the pirating of the files.
Yeah, that would and I don't know if maybe I don't know if maybe they could put away like a license key on it or something, where when you bought it, you bought a key. That way you couldn't go in and alter the file.
Yeah, I mean, I can see it actually going, because if you think, this is the same kind of argument that there was about the music industry with streaming back in the late 90s, early noughties with, if you remember Napster, people would upload tunes to Napster and you could download them. It was distributed all over the world. It's almost possible to police.
BitTorrent or something.
Yeah, BitTorrent and all that kind of thing. And the way that the music industry evolved to adapt to it was by using things like Spotify, streaming services, so subscription-based services. So I could see like you having with your airfix club membership, for instance, or Revell you pay a monthly fee and you get access to a library of their files. So if you make it a price point and give the value to the person, and a lot of people do this on Patreon and stuff. A lot of sculptors already have this model for distributing their files. You make it to a point where it's not worth pirating. It's like, I could pay $7 a month. I get access to all these files. I can print them whenever I want. Or I could go through all the hassle of trying to get them illegally with people that will put worms into the files and stuff to compromise your computer and all that kind of the data security point of it. It's finding that balance of, what is the price to the benefit. Once you got that right, I think I can see that kind of thing. In terms of having little history here, said there was no 3D printing 15 years ago, and it said there certainly was. There absolutely was. I mean, I got into 3D printing fairly early on. That was about 13 years ago, and it'd been going for a while. STL printing, stereolithography, goes back to the 70s. So it wasn't economically viable for small people to do it. But 3D printing became a cottage industry throughout the 21st century. Its origins go back much further. So,
just below that one, Julian Hall question: reference scalability. The individual doesn't need more than one of a model. What one wants and what one needs.
That is true. I mean, I have. I think at least 6 Revell ME262s, the 1/72 scale one.
Yeah, I mean,
from the 90s.
I may not need 3 of one model kit, but if I want it because it has parts, I got multiples of. I will almost always, if a kit is a 2-in-1, a 3-in-1. If I want one, if it's a 2-in-1, I want 2. Maybe 3. If it's a 3-in-1, I want 3 or 4. Why? Because I can take the parts and put them on another kit. I might build it one way, and I still got 2 other ways in the box I can build it. I got parts in the box. And well, now US, you're talking about $35 for a new release kit. I got a lot of parts for $30 versus going to a show and buying just a resin engine for $15-20, just wheels and tires for $15-20.
Yeah, people also forget that 3D printing, it only costs, like $1 or something to print something, but you've got to buy the printer to start with, right? And they're getting cheaper, but they're still hundreds of dollars.
Yeah, the prices, the
$200-300. Yeah. Then you've got to cure the stuff, and you can use the sun, which is free if you have it. Even the sun in the UK is enough if it's not raining.
It takes a little bit longer.
Yeah, it does. So it's better to have a curing station, which, they're fairly expensive. A cleaning station.
Yeah.
Yes, you can use homemade stuff, but it's like, again, it's messy. And what do you do with all that stuff? Purpose-built thing is easier. You got to, you cannot underestimate the convenience factor in just buying a model kit. Right? You go to the store, you don't have to have any outlay at all beyond the tools and stuff you already have, of course. You just go, you pick something off the shelf, and you have everything you need to build the kit. Yes, you can augment it with, hundreds of dollars of extra stuff, but you don't have to. You can just build that kit. If you have an STL, you've got to print the thing, and there's no guarantee if you haven't dialed your printer in, or it's a cold day, or there's an R in the month, or you've done something really, that is going to print first time, or maybe a part has warped, or you don't notice until you got halfway through that actually it hasn't printed this little bit on the inside. So now you've got to deal with that. A manufacturer still has some of those issues, but hey, guess what? You ring up their customer service and say, hey, part number 67 is dog shit. I want another one.
Right. Yeah.
Another one.
And if you have a printer, you can find something that resembles it, print it, scale it to what you need. That's why I really like it, especially for wheels and tires. I can take the box tire and put it in there and go, I can go this size with it and not have to make massive amounts of alterations.
Yeah.
And put it into the box and scale it, and it almost fits perfectly. I have very little alterations to do, or I can make it where I got massive amounts of alterations.
I think resin 3D printing is far more of a threat to companies like Eduard. Not so much now, because Eduard are traditionally, they started in photo etch, doing some resin stuff, then making kits. So not so much them anymore, but I use Eduard because they're a well-recognized name. But things like, Checkmasters used to be resin piece as well, but kits like Aries as well. The small resin, like accessory companies that used to do, poured cast resin accessories, exhausts,
right,
wheels and stuff, that I can see as being a threat to them. But of course, they have adapted as well, and a lot of them have switched into doing all of this digitally, because now they don't need molds. They can just 3D print it. And guess what? On that Mega that I have now, I could probably print out a couple of 100 wheels at once, on one run.
Wow.
Because they're not very big, that wouldn't take very long. Maybe 40 minutes to get a couple of 100 wheels, bag those up, obviously clean them all in one, cure them, bag them up, and sell those at $5 a pop. That's a pretty good business model.
Right. Yeah.
It's easy to check. You don't have big complex kits with lots of pieces to go through and QC and stuff.
If you have one or two fail, you still got 98.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But whole kits, there are some parts which print really well in 3D resin. There are some parts which are a real pain in the ass. Tank barrels, for instance, are one of them. Because resin tank barrels, like long, thin parts, anything that's long and thin,
right,
axles, that kind of thing, they can warp. So again, once you take on a manufacturer's mantle, you have to be mindful of all of those things that we slate airfix for. You know, the QC element, because otherwise you get a bad name. People don't buy your kits. You don't make any money. All that investment you put into 3D printers and resin stuff is suddenly a big liability. Right?
Yeah.
So I think it's a while since, you know, I think airfix, Val, Tamiya and stuff, I think the business models are okay for a little while. Probably at least for Brian and I anyway. You know, you young whippersnappers may have a different market ahead of you in 40 years' time, but I won't have to worry about that one.
Speaking of being old,
you get up very early though, Brian.
Yeah, it is my dinner and bedtime. She come in here about 20 minutes ago and told me dinner was ready. So,
well, I shall let you go. Thank you very much for joining. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for inviting me. It's been
most welcome.
I've enjoyed the discussion, and hopefully I'll get to do it again.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you, Alex. Thank you, y'all in chat. Y'all have a good evening. And
those of you who haven't checked out Brian's channel, Got Fuels, I'll link it in the video version of the stream. Go and check it out. It's got some really nice builds on there.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
Cheers now.
Have a good evening.
And then there was just the older gentleman in his retiring evening robe. So a few more popped into the chat. Hi, Matt. Hi, Fenris. Good to see you both. Dutch Dave, Flying Dutchman, welcome. In 40 years, he'll be 94. Yeah, I'll be joining you. Well, hopefully I'll be of that age. It's I mean, healthcare as it is, life expectancy is going up, but you know, who knows what state the NHS will be in 40 years. Fingers crossed. So I'm just going to go back. I just want to make sure that we haven't skipped over some questions. So apologies if we have. If we haven't got to something, you want to type your question back in the chat with question at the front. I shall be a little bit more, what's the word? Observant? Diligent. That's the word I was thinking of. So Iris Styrene, we took your question, but welcome. I also saw Nick Johnson, welcome. Yeah, I thought so. Flats were a thing 50 years ago. You get whole Napoleonic armies back then. Yeah. Usually made out of like tin or white metal, you know, lead as well. So I think they are a bit of a hangover, and I think it's now been adopted by these kind of almost cameo-esque kind of pictures. Just coming up to the present. Matt, yes, I am in a dressing gown. So I did explain at the beginning of the stream, but we're relaxed here. This is like, I feel like I should have a pipe. No, I got very sweaty and smelling of petrol fighting my lawnmower and attacking my garden with it this afternoon. So, or this evening, I should say. So yeah, I had to have a shower before getting on the stream, but I literally had 3.5 minutes. Okay. Did I get the email sent 2 weeks ago? Don't have to spend about paint order. Send it to me again, because if you've not had a response, it's likely I didn't get it, or it's got lost in my junk or something. So yeah, apologies for that, Gary, but send it again, and I'll get back to you. The Smoke Pit, welcome. Is it worth the money to get a resin printer? It seems like I can buy a bunch from third-party vendors for the price of a printer. So, as always with these things, I can't advise an individual on whether it's worth you getting a printer or not. Printers now have come vastly down in price, and the quality has increased a lot. So if you, but okay, I'll caveat. I'll put the negatives first, because rather than trying to sell you one, resin is not very nice. Even the water soluble resins, they still can, and they can get plant-based resins. It's still resin. The source where you get the resin from might be different, and they might differ in the kind of molecular structure of the resin, but they're still resins. They still have some commonalities in their structure. They're not very nice molecules. The way they, it's kind of in their nature for them to polymerize in the way they do with UV light. They have to be fairly active, so they're not very nice things. It's not very nice stuff to work with. Some people, it really irritates their lungs. So that is one thing. There's a health and safety aspect. In addition, you need, unless you're using water soluble resin, and that has come up quite a lot, they do tend to be more expensive. But if you're not, you'll need organic solvents like IPA or methanol to wash your prints with. Whatever you wash it with, whether it's water or solvent, once you've actually got that and you've got the resin monomers in there, you can't use that for anything else. You have to like stick it somewhere, maybe in a glass bottle, to cure the resin out of it, and then filter it off. So it's messy. Resin seems to get everywhere. It seems to be one of those things that, just gets, like toddlers, like spreading muck everywhere. Resin printers manage to get resin everywhere, even if, in rooms that they've never been in. So the whole process is messy. It's smelly, and it can irritate some people. So you need gloves as well and stuff. It can be frustrating if you can't get your printer dialed in, or you get failures for reasons you can't get. It's something you grow into. So it is a tinkerer's toy. It is not yet quite at the level of just consumer buys product. It's not like an air fryer. You can just buy it, you stick it in your kitchen, you press a button and it works. It's not quite there yet. I should say we're 5 to 10 years off something like that, if it ever gets to that stage, because of all of those factors. Now, that's all the kind of negative bits. The positives are, one, there are a huge number of files to be able to print. So, and that includes accessories, like I mentioned, the F15 nozzles before, entire kits, of unusual subjects as well, or figures, things that you can't find in other places. You can make as many as you want. Yeah, so if you want if you want to do an entire wing of a particular aircraft, you can do that, and the cost per unit is small, So if it sounds like something, if you enjoy tinkering with technology, if you enjoy that kind of aspect and you don't mind all the negatives, it's certainly worth taking a look at. I find it quite enjoyable. Having said that, when it doesn't work, it's very frustrating. So I hope at least that gives you a kind of insight into it. Do your research, have a look. There's a bunch of offers and stuff out there. One thing I would say is never buy one off Kickstarter. There are a whole bunch of 3D printers that offer, the next level of resolution or speed or whatever. They're almost always scams. I've been scammed on Kickstarter with a couple of 3D printer projects, something I would never do again. I would advise everybody else not to do. There are plenty of reputable companies selling 3D printers at good prices now that you don't need to do that. Anycubic, Frozen, Elegoo, are all reasonable quality, reputable, reproducible, and cost effective. There are a bunch of other companies as well, kind of more expensive, again, slightly more reliable stuff. So to some extent, you get what you pay for, but there are kind of more consumer, quite, I won't say cheap, but good value printers available should you want to go into that. And like modeling, you kind of get communities. There's a lot of Facebook groups, a lot of groups that will help you out. It is a very helpful community, I find. So you do get a lot of support there. Hopefully that at least gives you some pointers on whether it is the good choice for you. Star Trek replicators would be nice. Yeah. And I think science fiction writers have been talking about, kind of 3D printers, taking over, in the future, where you've just got, like, you can imagine a cartridge that you just put in the same way you would do an inkjet printer. I'm looking down here because I've got an inkjet printer right down by my feet. You guys don't know that, so you don't know why I'm looking, so I'm telling you. But if you could just put a cartridge in and it produced a thing finished, not having to wash or cure anything with that detail, that's not quite replicator level, but that's kind of where you need to get to. That's, I think, when it becomes, much more threatening, if you like, to the traditional companies. Yeah, I mean, FDM printers are good. I have an FDM printer. Matt from Model Minutes has a FDM printer, but you can't get the resolution that you get. It's not comparable to injection molding or to resin. Generally, you can get nice results. They're never as good as resin. A resin printer can go a tenth the resolution, and it's seamless, but for tools and for parts, FDM is usually superior. It has, you can have all sorts of properties as well. You can print in nylon, you can print in carbon fiber, you can print TPU, flexible filament, so you can have stretchy stuff, for tires, things. Question: how is the IPMS judging of Warhammer figures in the UK? So my understanding is there is no Warhammer judging. There is sci-fi. In fact, I have the right, let me actually put this up using that wonderful presentation piece. There we go. These are the judging categories for IPMS. So there's that 61 at the top there, flat figures, any scale that we mentioned before. These are all sci-fi, and this is what Warhammer gets lumped into these, depending on what it is. Yeah. I can't remember what all of the S, SK, ASD, ASC, VS are. I think they all relate to how they're made. There's a whole bunch of rules, as you can see. Oh, here we go. Any source converted, any source detailed, vac formed, scratch built. So, there are different categories depending on what they're made of, which, again, I don't really see the point in a lot of these. So, a Warhammer figure, depending on how big it was, would be a different category here. A bust would come here. Something that doesn't fall into any of the other categories, hardware. So that would be, a Tau hammerhead or something. And then the judging is done the same as any other IPMS competition. You are more than welcome. As I say, I personally wouldn't be without a resin printer. I don't use it as much as I used to. I used to do a lot of D&D with my friends. I used it for that all the time. It's really good for that. I haven't used it as much for scale modeling. And that's mainly because I had some patrons that I was a member of, some Kickstarters for D&D stuff. And I haven't had the same for scale modeling. So for scale modeling, it tends to be you buy stuff as you need it. And it can be expensive. There are some free things around, but usually you get what you pay for. A lot of the stuff is around tabletop gaming as well. So like Bolt Action or Flames of War, rather than for scale modeling per se. So just bear that in mind as well. Do your research on what kind of things you want to print, before you make the leap as well, I'd say. So yeah, in terms of not judging Warhammer at all, they do as part of the sci-fi, and Warhammer for for a long time wasn't allowed in the IPMS. Over the past few years, it has been allowed. There was quite a lot in, I say quite a lot. There was some, it's quite a lot compared to what there used to be, which was none, in the competition in 2023. But yeah, I mean, depends who's judging, I guess. So I guess it depends. If you're in the US, maybe that's different. Again, for me, this is the IPMS UK. If it is an international society, it should really be the same across the world. As far as I can see, it's not. You know, I've worked for most of the time when I've whatever roles I've had, I've worked for global companies, and there was one. It was a German headquarters of a Japanese company, and they had this awful term. It didn't really work in English. Global but local, right? So you have a global policy, and then it's locally applied according to variations in culture and stuff. That's kind of what I would see in international society being done. So like you'd have one sort of general overarching mission and vision and all those kinds of things, and then you would have differences, because for instance the US and Europe, massively different geographies, so you have to account for that in how you're applying things, like the competition, for scale and for how, in terms of size rather than model scale, and how far people have to travel, all those kinds of things. So just no. Me, a 10-foot pole and a chainsaw, what could possibly go wrong? Yes. Neil Micklethwaite, saw a t-shirt on Sunday. I may be old, but I saw Springsteen on tour. I bought it. Very good. So one thing so unfortunately I had to duck out of Airfix and Chill about 15 minutes before the end on Monday. And of course, Roy Cross hit the century a few weeks ago, and he sadly died this week. So hats off to him, and kudos for all the art he produced. Very evocative art, which I think is something that, in general, there are some exceptions, but I think in general we've kind of lost a lot in modeling. I think it's a lot more sanitized than it used to be, and I think I'd love to see more kind of, let's call it, excitement be injected into the art that we see. I mean, I think there was one which he did, I think it was the Airfix B17 cover, which had it, I can't remember if it was on fire or it had like flak bursts and stuff, but it was really, quite a powerful piece of art. And I think that was the way Roy Cross approached things, right? He was creating powerful pieces of art that were then used for model kits, rather than we've got to get a picture of, whatever, the Angel Interceptor, for instance. Even the Angel Interceptor had the Angel Interceptor flying and firing that, central cannon and stuff. But yeah, kudos to him for producing those kind of very evocative, very memorable pieces of art. And I think we've seen quite a lot, do the rounds on Facebook, and Airfix have put a couple up. I think it was the Lancaster or the Sterling, which was, I think, returning home after a bombing raid with the sun going down, or it was going off on a bombing raid, I don't know. But just the colors he used sometimes, very, very striking. And if you look at a lot of manufacturers, and I did this again in some of the videos I looked at, the best model manufacturer, I looked at box art as one of them. And I think Roy Cross's style wasn't ultra realistic. Okay, anyway, here we have the Bloodhound. In terms of like the technical piece of it, it's like, it's very well done, but it's not what I would call like the ultra realism that you get in some art. Not just now, but and his wasn't quite that. It was much more emotional, I think, and not impressionistic. That's the wrong word to use, but very evocative. You know, if you just look at the colours that I don't know if you can see it very well, how well it's going to come out on this camera. But just look at the colours that he's used for the grass and ground here. You know, if you actually look at it, if I can get away from most of the glare from all the lights, it's a very pale green. He's got yellow and brown in here, like almost ochre in some of these. Colors of the clouds, these are purples. These are all purple, the clouds, purples and greys against a pale blue sky. You know, again, very evocative, very kind of emotion driven, which I think part of the appeal of buying a kit is that kind of emotional connection you get to something, right? If it's just what I hated, and I know some people love them, but I hated the old 80s airfix kits, which was just the photo of variably built model, but it was like the actual model on a background. And it's like, to me, that is just like it just sucked the fun out of it. I hate those boxes. And I know it's a very personal thing. I know some people much prefer those. I think Roy Cross was a fantastic artist and kind of almost evoked it's kind of a very 60s artist. And I don't mean that derogatorily. I just mean the kind of styles that came out in the 60s and 70s. He definitely had that style. I don't know what to call it because I'm not an art critic. Very distinctive. Anyway. That is really, it was 1974 that he started. I guess, I mean, he did a lot though. I mean, in fact, using the power of Scalemates, I think we can actually see how many he did. I think it lists box art is one of, I mentioned the various strange filters and how I wish Scalemates had some different filters on it, but I think box artist is one of them. Box art artist Roy Cross, 380. Now that isn't all. There are some repeats there, so don't know how. Okay, if I just go for new tools, there are 54. Now that I'm just doing new tools because that has reduced out. Let me just actually put those up. I do need it. I've got a Stream Deck. It's not actually down there somewhere. It's not actually hooked up to this PC. It was on my other PC. I need to get it hooked up to here so I can do some of this stuff like at the press of a button rather than me pissing about. Here we go. So this is Scalemates filtered on Roy Cross and just new tools because, okay, he's done more than 54, but this is an easy way of just seeing without all of the repeats. Excuse me. So I have this particular rendition of this kit. The old Airfix Dornier 17, for example. You got a little broken aileron there. Got the Polish fighters coming here. The F111A. Again, just very evocative. And it's all it's doing is taking off, but in full afterburner, all of the flaps out, just kind of gives it a bit of life. You've got the motion little streaks here just to indicate its speed. The Hampton, I've got a couple of these kits. One of them is that horrible 1980s photo, and it doesn't bear any likeness to this, the old Roy Cross one. Such a funny aircraft, the Hampton. Looking forward to the 48 scale one from ICM. The Harrier in different iterations, 24th and 72nd. You know, the big old ship ones, you know, firing with the plumes of water. The B-25. I mean, quite what they're firing at, you know, flying level up at whatever altitude they are, I'm not sure, but that didn't matter, did it, as a child looking at this kit? Oh, I didn't notice that that's a solid nosed one, isn't it? Different version. Interesting. But yeah, there's quite a few missing there. So, you know, obviously I just did the new tools, and a lot of these would be reboxed, and the others would be reboxed, and he wouldn't have done the original art, and then we would have done the other ones. But just interesting to see all of that. Yeah, I mean, it's so this is one of the things that I've talked about a bit before. I know Fenris talks about it a little bit. If you're looking at things like an artist looks at them, rather than, and you know, in a sense, we all are artists. We work on a three-dimensional canvas, not a two-dimensional one. But if you get that eye of looking at the way light interacts with things and stuff, the colors you actually paint things aren't necessarily the colors that they were. It's the impression of what they're giving you, you know, and that's why we use filters and, you know, powders and all these other things, and again, to create the illusion of, you know, whatever it is at whatever scale. Gary says, I'm building the 172nd Blenheim 4 for the tribute build. Moss announced on Monday. Beautiful box art of the FFAF. I didn't realize Moss had announced a tribute build. I'll have to have a look at that, because I'll certainly get in on that one. Okay, apparently his last work was the box art for the German heavy cruiser Prinz Eugen, 1974. Interesting. Question: 3 biggest pains when using Scalemates. For me, it is, I would love there to be a filter by, well, 2 things. I would love a filter to exclude something rather than include it. That would be great. A manufacturer, like the kit manufacturer country, that would be super useful. And the other one, I just had it a second ago. I'll have to come back to. Oh, material, kit material. And again, to be able to just have injection molded styrene kits, for instance, rather than 3D printed or cast resin or whatever. That would be, if I could ask just one thing, that would be the number one. It's the one thing that is it makes Scalemates the hardest to use if actually trying to find a particular kit. So as a retailer, for people that come into the shop, trying to find a particular kit in plastic, not in resin, from an obscure manufacturer in Hungary, but like a run-of-the-mill injection molded kit, that is the number one. And plus also research for YouTube, it would be so much easier. Okay, it is coming up to the 2-hour mark, and I should really put some clothes on, although it's almost bedtime now. So I'll just take this one. Graham says, what is the best way to do soot for an afterburner? Tamiya X19 or use black oil? I think that was meant to be. It depends what afterburner you are looking at. So afterburners vary a lot depending on age of the thing. So if you look at, for instance, an F-15 has ceramic plates, and a lot of modern US jets have ceramic plates in the exhaust, and they tend to get soot in between them, but not actually on the panels. So check references is the best thing, because that will dictate then what effect you're trying to create on that. So an oil wash will be better than Tamiya X19 on something like that, because the X19 will stain the main pieces. And generally, if you're doing soot or deposits, engine deposits in small pieces, it'll generally be in those small pieces because everything else gets blasted out by the heat of the afterburner. So yeah, I would say probably it's going to be oils. X19 is great. I wouldn't necessarily use it for an afterburner kind of sooty effect. But again, really depends on your subject. Check your references and that'll tell you what. If it's an overall grime, X19 is better at representing that. Oils are better at representing like ingrained stuff because you can wipe the majority of it off and leave those surfaces not pristine, because they will get a little staining, but more pristine than that stuff in. Okay, that makes sense. Must announce the Roycross build after I'd left. Okay, I'll have to go back and watch that little last bit of the. I generally don't watch Airfix and Chill again because I've been on it. That seems a bit weird. Unless I've not been on it, in which case I do watch it. Or generally I don't watch it, actually. I have it on playing on YouTube while I'm doing other things. I think it makes quite a good podcast sort of thing. So yeah, I'll have to be a kid. Roycross did the, but I've got loads of those, so that's not a problem. And John Alec, nice to see you. I know, so John couldn't be on tonight. He's got to be up early. He's making a trip across the country for his daughter's graduation. So I think, if I've got that right, I'm not confused it with something. But good to see you could pop in. So we had a bit of a bounce around several subjects in that one. I'd love to hear your thoughts on the IPMS video that I did, what your thoughts are on the IPMS, and what relevance is, what you would like to see it become. If you could actually, which I think really should be a thing, have your voice in the IPMS. I mean, I don't know how you really get your voice into to change the IPMS, other than running for one of the positions. It should really be a poll of the 4,000 members, what they want the society to be, because it's a society. That means it's all of them are members. It shouldn't be, at least, a top-down sort of government-style organization. But yeah, I'd love to hear what you think the IPMS should be and what it should be about. As I say, on the video, I went through one of the tools I've used in my corporate life to kind of come up and think about what the IPMS should be, what I think it should represent, and how that, understanding what you're for then dictates kind of everything that you do. But I'd love to hear all of your opinions on what that should be as well. But anyway, that question, I feel, is time for keep that thought, hold that thought when John Alec joins us, hopefully next week, and we'll cover that then. Otherwise, thank you so much for joining. Apologies for my very casual evening attire. If I do it again, I'll try and get a pipe I don't smoke, but I just think it would go with it. I'll try not to do it again. But thank you all. Thanks for spending the time with me. Thank you for Brian. I will put a link to his channel on the video version of this when this is all uploaded. Have a great rest of your week. Enjoy the weekend when it comes, and I'll see you all anon, probably on Airfix and Chill, if not before. Okay, guys? No naked modeling, absolutely. Okay, thanks, guys. Bye now.